Hey everybody, this is Andrew here with Tower Electric Bikes, and today I'm going to walk through how to replace your crank arms and crank set. So some reasons you might want to do this: if you get some damage to your crank arm, or if your chainring teeth are a little extra worn down, you may want to replace your crank. It's the same process whether you're doing the left or the right. So today I'm just going to be showing you how to do it on the right chainring side, but if you're doing it on the left, it would be the exact same process minus having to deal with the chain. So the first thing you usually want to do is you want to take the pedal off, but I'm not going to do that in this video. I'm just going to remove this. So some tools you will need for this job: obviously you will need a new crank arm chainring. You will need a 14mm socket wrench, and then you will need a crank puller. We recommend the Park Tool CCP22, as this is the proper style for this bottom bracket. There are two main styles of crank pullers out on the market. You want to be sure you're getting the appropriate one. That's why it's usually best to go with this exact one from Park Tool. Again, that's the CCP22. If you use the other one, it will still thread in, but then when you actually go to remove the crank, you'll end up damaging your bottom bracket and the crank without removing the crank, and it's a whole lot of work to get them fixed and then off. So it's just best to use the proper one. And then some you also may need as well, but it's a little more optional, is like a soft mallet hammer or mallet. I have this Park Tool one that has this nice soft plastic end, but if you have like a soft mallet, that would work as well. You can use a regular hammer, but you could end up damaging your tool a little bit, so that's why we like the soft on there. So the first thing that we're going to do is there's a little center plastic cap on here. We're just going to pop that off. You may be able to get it with your fingernails like I did just now. If it's on there a little bit tighter, you may have to use some sort of pick tool or something. But it's just a little basic plastic cover cap that just snaps right off. Just set it to the side. Next we will take our 14mm little 14mm socket wrench, and we're going to remove this bolt from the inside here. All right, so we've got that bolt removed. We're just going to set that to the side. Now, the bolt is removed, but as you can see, this crank is still firmly on that bottom bracket. How this works is the bottom bracket at the end is tapered just a little bit, so that when you mount the bolt, what it does is it pushes this crank onto the slightly larger section of the bottom bracket, and it stays firm on the spindle of the bottom bracket. So basically what this tool does is it threads into the crank, and then using this center piece here, pushes or pulls it off of the bottom bracket. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to, and you can fully unthread this part, you can leave it partially threaded on. I like to take it off just because I feel like it makes it a little easier to get in there. Basically all you do is you just take this end with all these fat threads, and you'll see there's threads inside here where you pulled the plastic cap from, and just get this threaded on here. Now get this threaded on here as far as you can. One of the things that can happen if you don't thread this on deep enough is it doesn't get a strong enough bite on those threads. So when you use this part to push against the bottom bracket, when it starts pulling, instead of pulling the crank off with it, it's just gonna pull those threads right out, and makes the job a little more difficult because you just ripped out some of the threads. But as you can see here, this one is nice and tight on there, and usually about half of these threads being taken up or more than that is good to go. So now that that's on there, what we're gonna do is we're just going to spin this on. And this is potentially where you would use your shop hammer or soft mallet. So this one seems like it's going to be pretty easy here, but say this was really stiff and you couldn't move this with your arm, what you would do is you just take this and use it to tap it around until it gets to a point. And once it gets to a certain point, it gets very, very easy to spin because you've already pulled it off that fatter part of the bottom bracket. Just like that, the whole crank arm and chainring comes right off. So next, just unthread this. And again, you typically want to take your old pedal off before you do this. I'm just not doing that in this particular video. But just set that to the side. Now it's time to put your new one on there. So when you install this new one, remember that you want these crank arms to be opposite each other. Technically, you could install it like this, but as someone who's done that, it's not very fun to ride. So just be sure that those crank arms are opposite each other. So now that that's on there, again, you're just going to slot it on there. You're not going to push or anything, so it's just going to be on there fairly loosely. So next step we have is we're going to take that bolt that we removed earlier and just thread that in. And you're going to use your 14mm socket wrench to get it tightened on there. And then what it does is these bolts are designed sort of the opposite of the crank puller. It has a big sort of flared out spot here so that as you tighten this, it pushes that crank onto the spindle further and further. So, and there we go. Nice and tight. And of course, you're going to take that plastic cap, put it on there for looks. And then, obviously, I did the crank side, so I got to reinstall this chain. And just give some slack on your derailleur, and then just slot these over the teeth. You're good to go. Obviously, at this point, you would reinstall your pedal, but as far as the crankset installation, you would be all complete. Now, again, it's the same either left or right side. These particular parts are not reverse threaded like the pedals are. So you are all set with the new crank on your Tower e-bike.